between everyone getting home. I get that, and I'll try to keep this brief, but hopefully informative. I just want to kind of give you some heads up on some of the issues we're seeing that are fairly widespread. Also concerns to be looking out for as you are out and about during the spring, summer, and fall. So one of the big things that we're seeing is kind of an uptick in reports relative to boll issues within agricultural fields, primarily soybeans. However, there's been reports of alfalfa issues, potentially even corn issues. They're a lot less common, where this problem really comes down to primarily soybean producers. And we've got a bunch of different rodents that are found within our agricultural fields. Probably the most common are your Peromyscus species, your white-footed mice, your deer mice, as well as your house mouse. However, in certain situations, we do see an uptick in voles, primarily prairie vole. And the reason why this is a concern is they have the ability, they live in colonies, basically. And when those densities get up and food supplies are not what they need in terms of the plants that are there that are non-production plants, you go in, plant some soybeans, start seeing growth. You end up a couple weeks later or months later, take a look at your crop, and you see it looks like Swiss cheese, as is shown in the picture here. Unfortunately, this gets very difficult to spot on the front end, and it's even harder to deal with because there's not a whole lot of options at large scale. If this was landscape issues in terms of front yard, snap trapping is a very effective tool. When you're talking about hundreds of acres of crop field, that's no longer a realistic option. And all of this comes down to we've got about anywhere upwards of 80 voles an acre can be found within these fields, and that's a lot of mouths to feed. And they're primarily herbivores. Whereas our mice, which are actually we found to be much more abundant, are going to concentrate much more on seeds, and therefore they are not as big of an issue in terms of crop development and crop stand quality. So with this in mind, we had tried to address this issue. We received some funding from Kentucky Soybean Board a few years ago, as well as NRCS. With the idea, a lot of these issues were related to cover crops. There's a lot of great benefits from cover crops, but this is not a new problem. However, they do cycle. Voles tend to cycle in these 10-year increments, and it appears that cycle may be on the upswing in the vast majority of our state. It's not consistent throughout. It's not like the cicada emergence. These cycle on a local scale, has a lot probably to do with stress related from higher populations, which causes the downturn. But as they cycle up, we tend to see and hear a lot more issues. So the thought here is that voles basically existed in native habitat was grasslands. And one of the thoughts is that as we're putting cover crops out for all the benefits of cover crops, they are pretty much ideal vole habitat. They have green grass that's growing almost 12 months a year. It is creating overhead cover from predators. So you have both food and cover. It's the what we actually manage for wildlife. That's what we're trying to increase. So we're doing that within our production system, and it is going to increase vole numbers. So the thought was, we have these vole cover crops here. Can we alter that cover crop in such a way that may cause that habitat to degrade and dissipate to the point where when you're actually putting those soybeans into the ground, that those populations would decrease. So we tested that across three different treatments, where we looked at when that herbicide termination timing occurred. We looked at 4 weeks pre-planting, 2 weeks pre-planting, and a control was just prior to planting. We looked at survival of mammals. We went out and caught a bunch of these guys, monitored them. We monitored populations, and what we saw was there is a decrease in survival of these populations within these fields the earlier you spray. So you do see a downtick, right? So as that cover disappears, the guys are getting picked off basically by their natural predators, or they are vacating the area. And we monitor this in terms of survival and also total population. And if you look at this, the big thing, right? This is messy. There's a lot of figures here, and it's not a lot of time to digest it. But the trend here is the controls. We had constant growth in all of our rodent populations all the way up to planting. So that control is not getting rid of that cover crop until right before planting. So those populations are going up, whereas we saw a reduction in population growth for the 2-week termination, and then also a very early steadying off of that population at 4-week. So it may not be causing a downturn, but it is stopping the population from growing. It's not a solution per se, but it is something that may be able to help mediate a problem. And when we talk about what management solutions exist in this system, unfortunately, we are very no-till friendly in this state for very good reasons. Plowing fields was probably one of the main drivers in controlling vole populations historically in the last few decades. So as we've gotten rid of that, we have folks that are experiencing more and more of these issues. As I talked about already, snap trapping is not effective because of logistical issues. We have some repellents that are out there, but really they're not economically viable because the cost and logistics of getting them applied enough to have a positive impact is not going to work for most producers. And the other issue is, we talk about voles. We have issues not only just in soybeans and row crops, but we have issues in orchards, blueberry production. Well, within orchards and blueberry production, we do have a tool that's labeled for use, right? So zinc phosphide can be applied in those situations. It's effective. And we want to apply that basically right around October before we go into winter and knock those populations way back, because most of the damage they do is over the winter when they're girdling trees. So that doesn't exist in this system. You can use these zinc phosphide on the borders of the fields, and it is a way potentially to help in terms of keeping grass mowed, try to knock those source populations on the outside of the field down. But it is not going, if you have voles in your field, it is not going to solve your problem. And unfortunately, the tool that has shown some help, in addition to getting rid of cover crops, or at least minimizing cover crop food availability, is using the natural predators that are out there. So increasing your predator perches over top of any vole colonies you have can help decrease the survival of those voles. It's worked pretty darn effectively in vineyards in California. Barn owls eat several dozen voles a day. Coyotes actually eat several dozen voles, or not several dozen, over a dozen voles a day in the winter. So if you want to try to encourage those natural predators to be in the system, so you can do things like those predator perches, which you see in the top picture there. You can also use nest boxes, kestrel boxes, barn owl boxes, all to try to get them to frequent the area. And you should be thinking about where you put these, put them in areas you are experiencing the problem. And these will work in tandem with an earlier termination time of those cover crops, in hopes that, not only are you getting rid of what's protecting the predator, you're also increasing predator abundance, and hopefully that drives the population down. If you're going to do this and you're trying to invite these predators in the area, you don't want to be using rodenticide at the same time anywhere in the field, or outside the field, even in your barns, because at that time, because those rodenticides, those anticoagulants, they build up in the system of those rodents, and they start acting goofy. The predators are going to grab those things, and that then transfers over to them, and we actually then have some issues with the predator, or the natural predators, building up those anticoagulants and also then becoming impacted by them. So you're looking at, if you're experiencing vole issues or seeing vole issues, you want raptors in the area, and you want to increase use by foxes, coyotes, bobcats. Those are the two big groups that will drive vole populations down. So that may mean don't allow hunting or trapping of those major predators, right? So coyote hunting on your property or even within the vicinity, discourage it if at all possible. So I wanted to get into, since we're talking about voles, some of the other things that you see, and I'm trying to be sensitive to time here, which is why I'm skipping through some of these slides. I'm sorry. In the orchard horticulture setting, you want to be looking for tunnels, runways, are all signs of vole presence. You also have that picture on the right. There's that girdling component. And in landscaping, you can deal with vole issues in a way in terms of providing rocks around those newly planted trees. The voles won't actually use that substrate, so it protects them in that sense. But that is small scale management. At the larger scale, in terms of things like orchards, you really want to be using zinc phosphide in the fall to knock those populations way back. Make sure if you're going to use zinc phosphide, you're using distribution devices like pictured, PVC pipe. There's references out there on how to design them, build them out of PVC and what size PVC you should use. It takes 2 seconds to build them, and it helps prevent other animals from accessing that zinc phosphide. In terms of snap trapping in larger scale orchards, it is a helpful tool to identify locations where you do have populations, but it's not going to be a great management tool outside of small orchards in backyards or lawns. Next big one I want to get on your radar here we're winning the battle with wild pigs in Kentucky. That is something that many states cannot say, and we want to continue to say that. And the only way that's going to happen is if everyone's on the lookout for new populations of pigs. We have several priority areas in the state. Looks like that picture is not coming through great. I apologize about that. Where it's been a very big push the last 5 years within the USDA Wildlife Services to try to knock back wild pigs in certain areas. We were one of them, and we're somewhat low level, but we're at a point where any increased effort actually is going to yield a lot more results. So we have a couple priority areas, primarily in Western Kentucky. In LBL, there's a population, and just east of LBL, we're on the lookout for pigs. The Henry County area, which is up just northeast of Louisville, is actually down to 2 boars. They've been fighting that population for about 25 years, and through Landover cooperation and some helicopters, they are down to 2 males and have been at that point for about 2 years now. So it's been deemed basically a population almost extirpated. There are some other areas that are a little bit concerning in eastern Kentucky and along the Tennessee border. But we are basically asking folks to be looking for any wild pigs because we have new populations. Like there's a concern up in Lewis County area that there are a couple trail camera pictures that popped up of some sows. And the big thing here is if you can get them early when you have maybe 2, 3, 4 sows before they start breeding, you have a really good chance of knocking that population out. However, these guys can have litters up to 2 times a year, upwards of 10-ish piglets in each litter. And they themselves are sexually mature within a year and can have their own litters. It's exponential growth beyond belief. They're very smart animals. And we have, very smart animals and very destructive animals. And we also have concerns relative to diseases that have direct impacts on our livestock industry as well as human health. That some of these can transfer over quite easily to individuals. So we're looking for any signs of pigs, and they have a track that looks very similar to white-tailed deer. The big thing is that dew claw is somewhat different in terms of it's pointed out behind those hooves, and then the hog track itself is not. It's a little bit more splayed out relative to a deer. However, that's kind of hit or miss. But the dew claw is a pretty good giveaway. Unfortunately, in many situations, you need fairly muddy terrain to be able to see that. to get a good visual of that track. But the way they usually pop up, people notice, is when you have trail cameras out for generally either wildlife viewing or hunting. They will readily come to deer feeders, and when that happens, we want to know about it. And that's where we're looking for folks to really report these. And when they're seeing these pigs, the message that we have is, don't shoot them unless you have an individual by itself, right? So that's kind of counterintuitive. Most folks think that hunting is a great control tool. Hunting is really the reason why we have pig populations popping up over the state. We have very little natural pig movement coming up from Tennessee. These pigs are getting let go off of trailers or being cut out of fences. The desire here is to hunt them. There's an entire community that really enjoys hunting pigs, and we do not want to promote that. So the shooting component, though you may not want to hunt pigs, the shooting component is really driven by the fact that if you shoot into a sounder of hogs, which is a group of pigs, they learn very quickly to avoid people. They go completely nocturnal. They hide in areas that are not disturbed, and they become very difficult to trap. Trapping, when you have naive pigs, is the best way to get rid of the entire sounder all at once and remove that problem. And then you don't have any pigs that are running around that are people aware. And it's super effective when those populations are small. The larger the population you get into, the more you may have to use several tools, trapping being one of them, but helicopter sharpshooting is the other one that is being effectively used within Kentucky and Tennessee right now, and kind of helps overcome those pigs that are rather intelligent and trap shy. So if you see a pig, we want you to report that to either your county extension agent, who will let me know, or report it directly to Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. If you have pigs on your property, Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife and USDA Wildlife Services will provide trapping of those pigs for free. They will do all the work for you, provide all the stuff, the equipment. You don't have to do anything other than just give them access. And they're very good at it. They're going to be incredibly efficient at it. So if you're seeing pigs, please report them, don't shoot them, and let us know. And there's actually a big push right now within Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources to make pig hunting illegal in the state. It has been shown as an effective tool to help negate the growing of pig populations in other states. And we're hoping that that will pass because of the benefit of that. The information that, other sources of information, you have the pig website, just Google wild pigs, the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, that gets you all the information you need. There's also info on wildlife diseases that's available from University of Georgia, as well as USDA Wildlife Services has some general pages about pigs and pig diseases. I'm going to end on one last thing here that you should be at least thinking about. Probably wrong group, but just be aware of. We've kind of had a big scare with big problems with avian influenza, a highly pathogenic avian influenza. I just want you thinking, those that may or may not be managing chickens. If you're in there, I know this is not necessarily the group. However, some of you are producing things that are eaten by chickens. Or maybe you have production where you have small flocks of chickens yourself as part of your production system. Be aware that you're going to want to limit interactions with wild birds in any means possible. They spread through saliva, mucus, and feces. So if any way you can keep that from occurring, that's a good thing. There's a wonderful resource from Cornell and their wildlife health page on avian influenza that I think is a great thing for you to read if you have any concerns relative to that. So in summary, so we can finish up accordingly, make sure that you're thinking about when you're dealing with wildlife and wildlife damage and systems, and you need to be thinking about an integrated approach, lots of combination of measures that are going to really provide you the most efficient way of dealing with that. That should include things like deterrence, exposures, and may include things like hunting and trapping to remove those problematic animals. Make sure you're working on identifying and using the resources like your county agents to identify what animal is causing the problem. That way you can use the appropriate resources to try to limit those issues. I talked about pigs, but probably the two bigger things that most folks are dealing with are deer and raccoons. You have deer problems, you're going to want to look into exclosures on a small scale, but on a larger scale, you need to be thinking about hunting and hunt leasing potentially if you yourself are not hunting and doing so in an effective way where you're removing a lot of adult female deer every year. That's what drives the populations down. Raccoons, it's the same thing. Exclosures, electric exclosures, really, and trapping, and trying to reduce food that's available to increase those populations. And that would include things like bird feeders and deer feeders are two major sources of food that help create healthy, fat, and highly reproductive raccoons. So we want to limit that so that these guys are not food. We want to make them more food limited and not, a problematic issue. And lastly, like I said, report those wild pigs. It's the best control technique we have. We're at a point where we're winning. That can turn pretty quickly. And a lot of that has to do with the cooperators we've had within the wild pigs in Kentucky, including Kentucky Farm Bureau. Majority of our ag producers have been wonderful partners in trying to knock back pigs because many of you know the problems that they cause in terms of billions of dollars annually in just the commodity sector. And we do not want that in Kentucky. So anything we can do to limit pigs in Kentucky is a win for the ag industry. And with that, I will happily take any questions and check my chat box.
We do have time for questions. Wanted to thank you, Matt. You kept right on time. Good presentation.